Time for a culture war counterpunch. Defunding the police consequences hit some major cities. Mask wearing for years. And also, who's going to be Biden's VP? Rice or Harris? And will it matter? Welcome, everybody, to the Buck Sexton Show. Always an honor, a privilege, a pleasure to have you here with me. Thank you so much. I look at the news today, and it feels a bit like there's a calm before the storm. I think that the media is in a little bit of a wait-and-see mode for what narratives can take hold that will be the most damaging to the administration. What can they do to put Trump on defense again? Because their response to the speech that I talked to you about yesterday, his Mount Rushmore speech, was so unhinged that it didn't work. And I do believe that now there's a creeping realization that the Democrat Party is going to have to at least pretend that it's a little bit less crazy if it's going to win this election. You see, if you understand everything that's been going on from the start of this year, really the start of COVID, because that's put us into a whole new political cycle, political realm. You've had, when we would normally see base mobilization efforts by Democrats, that's been the absolute panic over COVID, and also this mobilization of the Black Lives Matter movement, Antifa, the protesters toppling statues. We got to come up with a name. Statue topplers doesn't really sound, if we call them iconoclasts, that term initially referred to people that destroyed statues. It has a long-standing historical significance, destroyed statues and paintings and icons, and it goes back to to Christianity and the destruction of religious imagery. So we can't call them the iconoclast, because in the contemporary context, that's like someone who, breaks down the sacred cows of a culture. No. We got to come up with a name that shows they're a bunch of lunatics who don't know what they're doing, who will topple a Frederick Douglass statue and Columbus statues. And Gandhi has come up for cancellation too. Churchill, of course, I guess we shouldn't be surprised about that. The people who think they're fighting fascism today want to undermine the man who rallied the entire civilized world against fascism 100 years plus ago. Or less than 100 years ago, rather. So now we're at this phase where they're trying to figure out what the division of labor is going to be between the various factions of the beat Trump, elect Biden effort. They've got some problems, though. For one thing, they've told us so many times with COVID that we should all panic. And this will be a discussion we have in greater detail later on in the show. They've told us that the numbers are going to be X and they're really Y. They've told us that certain measures will work or shouldn't be done, and they don't work or they should be done. They keep changing. And anyone who's been paying attention and remembers also knows that you would be foolish. You would be foolish at this point to discount that there was a public health expert betrayal. It was a betrayal of the public trust, where they were so scared of being called racist that they were all in favor of the BLM protests. And now, magically, suddenly, the gathering together in close quarters for long periods of time of tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of young people, that's who's at these protests, people that are 20 to 35, we have spikes in caseloads. And almost no stories whatsoever about maybe this was related to spreading the virus further. Now, I'm also not somebody who panics at younger, healthier people dealing with this virus, because I recognize the data that we have, and also historically a virus that is going to eventually, where we're going to eventually beat it through herd immunity, is going to have to infect a lot of people. And now there's even some talk about how the vaccine against this may be more like a flu vaccine, which means you have to get it every year, and it's only 40 to 50% effective. And so you know what that means? We're going to be dealing with this. So it's a question of how do we deal with it? But put aside for a moment that those facts and details. We'll get to that later on. I can see that the Democrat media apparatus right now is in a little bit of a reset, because now they're going to have to start putting Biden forward more, and Biden can't afford to sound completely insane, right? It was great for the Democrats up to this point to have the streets full of protesting lunatics and taking down statues and throwing rocks and looting and burning, because they're saying, oh, look at Trump, look at your law and order president not getting it done. Look at how bad the country is. Like insurgents undermining a national government. All the Democrats had to do was create misery, despair, and perpetuate the conditions for a continued lockdown. And then they were winning, right? Trump's approval rating is going down, down, down. They're going to continue this, but they're looking to strike some sort of balance between insanity that mobilizes the left-wing base, that gets the statue topplers and the BLM protesters and all the rest of them out there. Remember, it's not just so that those groups and the Democrat Party that they represent feel emboldened, empowered. It's also meant to coerce all the other people in society who are saying, whoa, I don't want the protesters online or in person to come after me, so I guess I should go along with this. There's a massive cultural influence from these protests that spills over not just onto social media, which is now our primary, especially in the era of COVID-19. Digital and online communication is our communication now, right? We're not seeing people in person the way we used to, but the protest movement has spilled over online, but also into workplaces now. It's a professional liability to be a Republican. We all know this. It's a professional liability to talk about facts and figures and data when it's sensitive for the left. Can't do that. Find yourself in a whole lot of trouble. So we're right now in this moment, in this momentary pause. Now, when I say pause, I'm not saying they're still trying all these things, the COVID panic. We'll talk about all that today. But you can tell that there's a reformulation of the all-out assault on Trumpism that's going on right now. And that's why I think it is so important, before the president gets put on defense again, this president has to go out on offense with his message. We need a counterpunch against the fascist, loony left. That's what we have to do. That's what is needed. Messaging out there in public, and not just from the president, and not just from a handful of surrogates in the White House. I mean, from everybody who believes in this movement, has to start making it very clear, what would 4 more years of Trump get you? What is the mission? What is the agenda? What are the stakes? The president before was able to turn some of the media, this was in 2016, turn some of the media's biases and weaknesses against it. CNN and these other massive media entities, not massive audience, but massive legacy institutions that make most of their money by telling, in the case of CNN, the rest of the world how terrible America is. You know, CNN International, CNN.com. That's how they make their money, just so you know. But when you look at what was different then from now, the president was able to get them, his opponents, to put him on TV all the time, because look at the spectacle. Look at this ridiculous fellow. Yeah. Every one of those rallies, people were looking at that saying, this is a real movement. This guy's got something. He's tapped into something. But the media executives, the liberal hacks that might as well get a check from the DNC, they were thinking, oh, well, what a buffoon he is. And ha, Hillary's going to win. They all thought Hillary was going to win. They're not going to do that this time around. Now they understand that it's not like putting up this Trump carnival for everybody to mock and make fun of. They're going to try to suppress the message in as many places as they can. That's why you're seeing this boycott against Facebook taking effect right now. Companies saying we will not advertise anymore on Facebook until they do more to stamp out hate. Really? What qualifies as hate these days? Secure borders? Believing that immigration law should be enforced? Is that hate? Because I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people in the Democrat Party, like almost all of it, would say, yeah, that's hateful. So now they're going to try to suppress the message, And they're still bitter about this. They're still angry. They thought they were ridiculing Trump by exposing him to all of America and promoting and showing these rallies on TV. No, they were just giving promotion for his message. They're not going to make that mistake again. We can't rely on the same playbook because in 2016, the libs thought that Hillary had it in the bag, and they thought that Trump was just so outlandish and ridiculous, and they believed all the polls that they could cash in on the absurdity of the Republican front runner, or the candidate rather, and both front runner and then candidate, and then it would be useful for the Democrat Party to come in and say, see, we have Hillary. Look at how sophisticated and brilliant we are. So that's not going to happen this time. They got surprised. That was a sucker punch. Now we need a counterpunch. Right? Now we need, okay, we understand they're trying to make the country miserable, push lockdowns, push racial division, the attacks on our history, the attacks on our civilization. They're trying to do all of that. What do we do to respond to it? What can President Trump do to lead the movement? And I think that speech that he gave was the beginning of that counter narrative, of that response that is necessary now to show us that there is a choice, there is an alternative to the absurdity, the dysfunction, the hypocrisy of the Socialist Democrat Party. And that's what it is. It is a party of socialists now. They will pretend they're not because that's a word that still rightly offends the American political sensibility. And that's why they didn't go with Bernie Sanders. Not because Bernie Sanders was too far left. It's because Bernie Sanders' brand of Democrat socialism was too honest. The Democrat Party cannot be honest. You see this over and over. The Democrat Party cannot tell you what it's really all about, what it's really going to do. Not when elections are happening. No, they're going to deploy every resource, every platform they have to convince, suburban moms in Ohio and convince steel workers in Michigan, hey, we know, okay, maybe Hillary wasn't so great and likable and she's corrupt and dishonest and horrible. Fine. But, Joe Biden, we wouldn't elect Joe Biden if we were socialists. He was in the Senate for almost 40 years. You can trust us. Blue collar Joe. And we all know what happens if he's elected. All of a sudden, the people writing the legislation are the same activists and think tanks and organizations and media outlets that are excusing the cancel George Washington movement, the cancel Hamilton, the beloved by libs Broadway play movement. That doesn't go away, but they're going to try to hide it. Look, we can have discussions here about the nuances and complexities of what their messages are going to be. They will hold two beliefs at the same time. They will flood the airwaves with contradictory messages, right? One day, Joe Biden will be the law and order candidate. The next day, he or his VP will be out there talking about how we need more police reform and defund police might be too far, but, they're going to just say whatever they have to say in the moment to get the numbers moving in the right direction. And don't even get me started on what happens with mail-in voting. As we know, Democrats don't want any rules in the election process because they would feel morally justified in cheating to win. Right? There's no problem. It's just a question of can they cheat and get away with it and win? But if cheating means that Donald Trump doesn't get to be president for 4 more years, they say he's a threat to the republic. They think that he's going to start a war with North Korea, that he's a Russian asset, that he's a sexual predator. They'll say anything about Trump. And many of them, unfortunately, believe it. So we need two things to happen right now. The president to begin that discourse with all Americans who will listen, not just his supporters, but the people that are going to make the difference in those swing states. What will it get you if you vote for Trump? The New Hampshire rally this weekend, certainly a good step in that direction. But we need a lot more of that. And we need to not have people on our side afraid right now. A lot of people, they want to hold on to their their tiny little slice of the cable news pie somewhere. Oh, got to stay with that. Or they want to hold on to, whatever stations or platform or whatever they have. Pretend that they're a big warrior for the cause, but play it safe. See which way the battle's going. Stay on the edges of it. Don't get right in the middle of it where people are swinging battle axes, right? That's going to be a huge problem for us if we don't have the people who can afford in every sense, professionally, financially, to take some risks. God bless Tucker Carlson for being someone leading the charge on this one. His show is taking a hit with advertisers, and he still keeps pushing the truth. It's also why he had the biggest quarter of cable news ratings ever. Any show ever. What was the magic sauce? Speaking the truth and doing it like you don't know what your status, what your job will be tomorrow, but it doesn't matter. You use the platform you have to speak the most truth and to do the most good for the country while you can. If that becomes the ethos of the conservative media, the Republican Party, at least some of it, the Trump White House, and the president himself, speak the truth. Don't worry about tomorrow. Do what you can today to tell as many people what is real and what is necessary. Defend this republic while it is still a republic. If that becomes our rallying cry, we will win. That in and of itself becomes the tactical genius, the counterpunch that deals with all this other stuff. It starts with a willingness to speak truth and to face consequences in the near term in order to save this country in the long term. Do we have it? We'll see. But those are the stakes, and that's where we are right now, and I think we should understand that right now. Look, working from home is driving up one of the worst types of cyber theft out there, home title theft. You see, it's pretty easy for the bad guys to do this. They simply find the information about your home's title online because it's all over the place. And then they use that information to take out loans against your home. This means that you then get stuck with the payments and they just get to take a bunch of your equity to the bank. This is terrible stuff. The FBI is warning people across the country to be on the lookout. But, there's a better option for you than just being scared about this. You can actually do something. That's where Home Title Lock comes in. Your home's title is online, so anybody can find it. You need protection in the event that the bad guys go after your home's title. Banks, insurance, and basic identity theft services don't protect you. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. Protect your home now. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim of this cyber theft. Use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection to help you get through this very difficult time. That's code BUCK after you go to HomeTitleLock.com. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com.
Governor, let me just ask this question point blank. President Trump essentially embracing the Confederate flag, right? Why else would you tweet out flag decision, as in the decision to remove it, has caused lowest ratings ever, all caps, exclamation point. Why? Why is he doing this?
He's flailing, Aaron. He's in a meltdown, and he looks at his polls, and he doesn't know who to blame. He blames his advisors. He's even blaming Fox News now, and he's flailing, and he doesn't know how to stop things. So I think he's just throwing everything out over the period of the last 3 days, hoping he's going to strike a chord. And what he doesn't realize is that base he has, the edges of that base are beginning to fray. That base is getting smaller and smaller. And at the same time, of course, because he's a Republican, he's causing a brand problem for Republicans. And mark my words, there's going to be a point in time where these folks are going to leave, and then many of them will say, well, I was never part of this. I never supported him. But at the meantime, because they had gone along, they've enabled him to do these kinds of what I think are just totally outrageous things.
Mark my words, Kasich is a moron and he's wrong. And if we listen to people who are, quote, Republicans like him, we will definitely have President Biden for 8 years. You know that the left is having a moment of pause here where they're not really sure exactly what the best method of attack is. They've had weeks now going on, the last really month or two, all feeling like they're just in this blitzkrieg against Trump, right? They're mowing down all the opposition. They're destroying anybody who gets in their way. Republicans are running scared. Trump gave the speech this weekend. That was useful. But there's another place, another area of national politics right now where Democrats don't really have a good answer for what they're going to tell people as they get closer to voting. Right? It's one thing to have the BLM activists all chanting about how they want to defund police and all these protesters running around pulling down statues and Antifa acting like lunatics months and months before the election. But as we get closer here, Democrats have got a problem. And it is that the violence spikes in some of the major U.S. cities that have occurred, that you could say this is a return of what Heather McDonald had termed the Ferguson Effect. And we've had Heather on the show many times to talk about it. It's a straightforward idea. When cops are not supported, they do less. They are less aggressive, less willing to take risks to themselves, to their careers, because they don't have the political backing to do their jobs. And that's true in some cities. Can you imagine being in Atlanta, where they're threatening to execute a cop for defending himself against a convicted criminal who tried to use a weapon on the police officer after resisting arrest? Not fire the cop, not maybe he spends a couple of years in prison. No, death penalty. And yet Atlanta turns around now, the Atlanta mayor turns around and says, well, it's a perfect storm of a lot of things, COVID and all this other stuff, and really it's Trump's fault. There are limits to the stupidity of Democrat arguments when it comes to their effectiveness. I'm not saying that there's no limit to how stupid Democrat arguments will be, but there are limits to what is effective. It is possible, even for the socialists and the leftists among us, to make an argument that is so dumb that it does not serve their purposes. And saying that Trump is responsible for violence surging, and it is clearly surging. The data is in, no question about it. Surging in Atlanta, surging in New York. The Georgia governors had to call in 1,000 National Guard troops because things are so bad there. Wait, I thought that Black Lives Matter was going to make cities safer for predominantly minority areas, right? Where most of the violence is concentrated. I thought they're going to make things better in police community relations. No, I didn't think any of that. You know why? Because we've already been through this and things got worse. The police are not the problem. The police are the centerpiece of the solution to the problem. Democrats don't have a good answer for this. They don't have a way of explaining to anybody who, has two brain cells to rub together. Hold on a second. You've been making the police the enemy here, and you've been trying to pull funds, and you've been supporting this narrative. And cops, remember, cops may be defunded only in a handful of cities so far, but cops everywhere across the country know one misstep, one thing that could be misrepresented that's captured by a nearby cell phone video. And not only could your career be ruined, you could face the ruination of your life, and you could even face your own state government threatening to put a needle in your arm and a bag over your head as a murderer. We all know what the impact of that is on police psyche across the country. I know from talking to cops here where I am in New York and across the country. It's obvious. What do Democrats have to say about this right now? Oh, I mean, look, they're going to lie. They're going to say, oh, no, it was always just but people are going to get tired of the obvious ploy here of, do you support Black Lives Matter? Well, are they asking me if I support the movement or the concept? Everyone supports the concept, the statement. Do I support the movement that it represents? I've said this before. It really is true, and I know this seems like a digression, but in the fantastic comedy Parks and Recreation, which you should skip to season 3, really, not even season 2, and start it there because the first season's bad. But in that fantastic show, there was a group of people that every year gather in the park. It's a joke. It's a comedy. They gather in a park and they claim the world is going to end. And every year it doesn't end, but every year they say they've received another sign from their prophet in the spaceship or whatever, who's saying, oh no, it's going to be next year. But they're called the reasonableists. And the whole point is, well, how can you disagree with the reasonableists? Are you going to say the reasonableists are unreasonable? I know, it seems silly. But that's effectively what the tactic is. It's the same thing as, do you believe in climate change? Well, what does that mean? Yeah, I think the climate is changing. The climate has always been changing. Well, do you believe, yes or no? They make it seem like a religious article of faith because for many of them it is. And if you disagree, you're a bad person. Or if you don't answer in the affirmative. But answering in the affirmative then means that they will attach to you. They will claim that you have agreed with a whole series of decisions and policies and beliefs. Same thing is true of Black Lives Matter. People are going to get tired of this as they see this play out again. We all understand. There is zero disagreement about Black lives mattering in American society. It's a statement of the most obvious moral truth imaginable. But the reason that that's the name of the group, founded by a bunch of Marxists, is specifically so that they can have a political entity that is difficult to criticize without sounding like, what, you don't care about Black lives, right? Sounding like you're actually a racist. And that they can shoehorn whatever policies and ideas they want into under this umbrella, and it has a degree of not just protection, but built-in acceptance. People will go around and the perception is, well, everyone agrees Black Lives Matter. Does everyone agree with everything that what Black Lives Matter is doing is a correct policy? Oh, the elimination of the nuclear family, as has been pointed out. A classic Marxist idea. People say, oh, how is it a Marxist group? Eliminating the nuclear family allows for the disintegration of the one bond that we all have and should have that is more important than the state, and that any of us in a free and moral society would place above the mandates of the state. You know, if the government decides that, one of my siblings was an enemy of the state for political reasons and it had gone tyrannical, I would take up arms against the government. No question about it. No question. I'd go down fighting. Right? The true statists, the true Marxist, leftist radicals. I mean, really, all Marxists are radicals, so some of this is going to be a little bit redundant. They understand that to make people truly servants of the state, you have to destroy that bond with the family, which is why famously in the Soviet Union, they elevated a boy who turned in his own parents for being counter-revolutionaries. This propaganda existed for a very specific reason. It's why the secret police loved and used in the most widespread fashion informants in families against families. Break down the family structure and there's nothing you can trust more than the state. The state becomes your family. Now, isn't that twisted, especially when, as we know, all of the social science, the real data, social science, I don't even like really as a term, all of the data and all of human experience for the last, let's call it 50 years or so, has shown, because that's when we've had the disintegration of the family, has shown that family structure is the single most important determinant of an individual's future prospects by all the percentages and by all the numbers. How likely are you to go to prison? How likely are you to die young? How likely are you to have out-of-wedlock births? How likely are you to either be abused or be an abuser? Family structure. If you could have one thing, one advantage that you could give people of all races, all backgrounds, all religious groups, it's in fact to maintain the nuclear family, as they refer to it. I just like to call it the family. If you maintain that, you are doing enormous good for the people involved. And there's no counter argument to this, really, except the left wants to destroy it all. So they always try to elevate and and celebrate the destruction of the family in different ways. Oh, this is all great. Oh, being, single parenthood. Look, life is imperfect. I'm not judging anyone, and it's not about that. It's about what do we try to promote. It's about what do we try to replicate as a society. But the elevation, for example, of single parenthood, particularly single motherhood, by liberals as desirable as opposed to something that happens and people do their best under the circumstances, this is all deeply counterproductive. But you see, we're not even talking about any of this, are we, as a society right now? No, we're talking about pulling down statues because they make you afraid with all of this talk about systemic racism and the Confederate flag and all these issues where you go, well, I don't, I'm against that, or I don't like that. And hold on, they put you on the defensive. They make you fearful. And then while we're all silent, while we're all quiet, these other things start coming up. Oh, we're also going to eliminate, we're going to eliminate the family structure. We're going to make sure that the welfare state is even has even more lax regulations, is even larger than it had previously been. They'll try to just increase the role of society as a mechanism for redistribution and social justice in every way possible, while we're all sitting there saying, hold on a second, I just don't want to get called racist. They're pushing transformational, and by their own words, they say, Biden has even said, transformational national policies. That's what they're trying to do. But one thing that they don't address is who gets lost in the meantime, who suffers. Oh, that's right, minority communities where violence is spiking. And the media is shockingly, or no, I should retract that statement. The media is, of course, as expected, completely uninterested in that story.
I was asked probably 12 questions about the Confederate flag. This president's focused on action, and I'm a little dismayed that I didn't receive one question on the deaths that we got in this country this weekend. I didn't receive one question about New York City shootings doubling for the third straight week, and over the last 7 days, shootings skyrocket by 142%. Not one question. I didn't receive one question about 5 children who were killed. And I'll leave you with this remark by a dad. It broke my heart. A dad of an 8-year-old lost in Atlanta this weekend. They say Black Lives Matters. You killed a child. She didn't do nothing to nobody, was his quote. We need to be focused on securing our streets, making sure no lives are lost, because all Black lives matter. That of David Dorn and that of this 8-year-old girl.
And yet there won't be any marches or protests about any of that, will there? Here in New York, it has become pretty standard to share the latest videos of just the brazenness, the viciousness of crimes that are occurring now, in some cases in broad daylight. I'm sure you've seen the video of the elderly woman getting shoved and falling down and hitting her head on a fire hydrant by a guy who'd been arrested over 100 times. But criminal justice reform, President Trump was told by certain advisors, that was the way to respond to this Marxist uprising. Oh boy. Oh my. And then you had a video that's actually several now. There's a video of someone executing 2 people in the stairwell of a building here in New York where they're frantically trying to get into a door. They see the gunman coming up the steps, and it's just gut-wrenching. It's horrible that any human being could be so heartless and vicious. And there's a video of a guy driving in broad daylight out in Brooklyn, New York, and he with a guy, the victim walking with his 6-year-old daughter in broad daylight, and the passenger of a car sticks a handgun out and just shoots him a few times, kills him dead right there on the street while he's holding his 6-year-old daughter's hand. This is what's happening every day across this country. But if you bring any of this up, you will be met with people chanting, justice for Mike Brown. You'd say, what? What is Mike Brown? What does that have to do with any of this stuff? Mike Brown tried to attack a cop and take his gun and got killed, according to black eyewitnesses and according to the Obama administration's Department of Justice. We're still talking about this like he didn't get shot because he was trying to kill a cop? Justice for George Floyd, they chant. Okay, the cop who killed George Floyd is facing the rest of his life in prison. We're a country of 330 million people. There's going to be a couple of bad cops every year. That's going to happen. A dozen, 2 dozen, that's going to happen. No matter what kind of society we think we're living in, right? No matter how good police community relations are. So what about what happens every day? What about the criminality that is just considered to be a fact of life in so many communities now? In Chicago, it's completely out of control. In New York, it's trending toward what it was in the past. Big spike. Even the moron-in-chief, de Blasio, moron-in-chief for New York City, even he says things are looking pretty bad right now. Where is the concern, the outrage about this? Where's the desire to save thousands of black lives that are lost every year? In fact, I think last year it was almost 8,000 African Americans killed by other African Americans in cities across the country. That's the number. That's the statistic. Where is the focus on saving those lives? Thousands and thousands. Think of the families that are shattered when one of these individuals, these are people's sons that are dying in the street. And you never hear the kind of outrage rhetoric from the media about this. You never have the same focus on the children who are being shot on the streets of Chicago. Not once in a while, every day. Every day. But Democrats think they have the moral high ground here because they'll focus on one bad cop here, one bad cop a couple of years ago, and in some cases they're focusing on cops who didn't do anything wrong, like Mike Brown. And that situation with Officer Darren Wilson. There we go. I had to remember his name. They don't care. This is all about politics. It's not actually about making people safer. It's not about making our society better. This is about power, and it's about mobilizing emotions for their own side and fear in the other side to put forward policies that, as we're already seeing, will result in more people attacked, raped, murdered, violated in every criminal way imaginable from all races and backgrounds, but disproportionately, the victims will in fact be minorities, people of color, young black men in this country because of the policies that the Democrats are pushing forward. That's just where we are.